What's happening, y'all? Welcome inside the Fantasy Stock Exchange. Danny and Bush coming at you with some Dynasty buys. Obviously, the season is over now. We're transitioning into Dynasty content, Dynasty season. A lot of you guys that play in Dynasty leagues, maybe you're in multiple leagues, are probably wondering, who should I be buying? We'll also talk about some sells tomorrow and how you guys want to go about trading for those guys. So with each guy that we talk about, we're going to specify whether it's for a rebuilding team or a contending team, and also show you some real examples of Dynasty trades that have happened per DLF that we can show you kind of to gauge the value of those players if you want to go out and trade for them. So if you guys do enjoy this video at any point, hit the like button, comment any of your thoughts down below, and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Danny, how are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing well. And we kind of always refer to the Dynasty trade market when we talk about, our patented series such as Dynasty Decisions. But we're kind of here to give you guys a glimpse as to what exactly the market is entailing right now and what you should really prioritize in your buy selections for the market. Because, again, at the end of the day here, we're not searching particular players when we're playing Dynasty. We're searching for particular values. And let me tell you, there are a lot of values on this list today that we're ready to get into.
Yeah, for sure. Because sometimes we might like a player's value, right? And that doesn't mean we're necessarily buying or selling. We're just holding if we have them. But, if Justin Herbert's the QB3 consensus in Dynasty, we might not want to go out and trade for Justin Herbert because we think that's properly where he should be valued, right? So that's kind of what we're talking about here. So without further ado, we're going to hit the intro and then we're going to get right into this. We are going to start with quarterbacks. Now, if you guys play in one quarterback leagues, I'm sure this position isn't as valuable, but both me and Danny play in Dynasty Superflex only. So quarterbacks are quite valuable in that format. So if you're a contending team, what is a quarterback that you're going out and acquiring?
Yeah, and this is a guy that kind of gets stigmatized because at the end of the day, from a real life level, people really like bashing on him. But I think Kirk Cousins is a really good quarterback buy, especially if you're in a contending situation. Now, you're not going to get this guy to be your quarterback one. I'm never saying that you're going to put him on a pedestal of Matthew Stafford, Dak Prescott, other older quarterbacks that you expect to return quarterback one value. But lucky for us, that's not where he's currently being valued. He is currently the quarterback 22 via keep trade cut, and his age is 33 years old. And you guys could kind of see the relative deals that he's been included in. But for example, let's look at this first one. CeeDee Lamb and Kirk Cousins, this guy was able to acquire for Amon-Ra St. Brown and 2 2022 first-round picks. Now, in my opinion, lowest level projection that you could really have is realistically Amon-Ra and a first for CeeDee Lamb. So let's just cancel out that trade cancel out that side to kind of give you a proper valuation from this trade standpoint as to what Kirk Cousins would be worth. So a 2022 first straight up for Cousins. If you're in a contending situation and you can lock down Kirk Cousins, who is pretty much a locked and loaded top 20, top 15 fringe quarterback on a year-to-year basis, I'm absolutely doing that. Now, the main question that people are going to have as to why he's valued here is, what is the long-term future of Cousins? Because from a real-life perspective, it's more than likely that if not this year, maybe next year, he is not a Minnesota Viking. But again, from a fantasy perspective, we have to actually equate and contextualize what real life would be. Kirk Cousins is going to be a starting quarterback somewhere, whether that's in Cleveland, whether that's in Minnesota, whether that is in another contending NFL team needy situation. And Kirk Cousins has shown that in Washington and in Minnesota, he's been able to produce, and he's a good real life NFL quarterback. So being able to get him here, around the range of like a Davis Mills, even a Baker Mayfield, more unproven options here, I would much rather just take the guy that I know is actually a really good real life quarterback.
Right. And not only that, but like you said, he's not going to be, your elite fantasy quarterback that anchors your super flex roster, but he is going to be a guy that's going to give you solid production. And he's still young enough to the point that he's going to be productive, at least probably until his mid 30s. And he's still got a couple years until that point. So yeah, I definitely makes sense. He is a perfect contending, window quarterback to go out and buy, because you don't want to pay an arm and a leg for a Justin Herbert or Joe Burrow, which makes sense because, if you're a contending roster, you probably have a lot of pieces on your team that you don't want to move, and you don't want to sell the farm necessarily from a draft capital perspective either.
Yeah, and for sure. And I mean, and this is a guy in Kirk Cousins who is, since 2015, has only had one season outside of the top 15 quarterbacks in fantasy football. So again, I get it. He doesn't have an elite top 5 upside, but if you could pretty much lock down a fringe quarterback 1, quarterback 2 on a year-to-year basis for a quarterback 22 price tag, you should do that in the instant.
Right. And some of his best finishes, too, have come when they've gone a little bit more pass heavy. And now that Zimmer is gone, maybe that is the case, right? They do have Justin Jefferson still. KJ Osborne obviously showed some things. Adam Thielen will be coming back. So maybe whoever gets hired by Minnesota comes in and they're like, hey, we got good passing weapons. Dalvin Cook and Alexander Mattison are capable in the passing game. Why don't we pass the ball more instead of running the ball all the time? And that's definitely possible that a new coach might come in and have that realization, or, Kirk Cousins gets traded to a more pass heavy team.
Yeah, no, 100% agree. Now, Corey, who's your first quarterback you would suggest as a dynasty buy for this video?
Yeah, so contending wise, another guy that's pretty much the exact same age as Kirk Cousins, Ryan Tannehill, quarterback 21, right now, currently in trade cut value. And the reason I think he's a value right now and a guy that you should be acquiring is because he was going a lot higher than this before the season. And nothing really changed about Ryan Tannehill's situation. The only thing that happened was A.J. Brown and Derrick Henry and Julio Jones being marred with injuries all season. And Ryan Tannehill wasn't necessarily the guy that you wanted coming into the season. And I personally had him in our listener dynasty league. He didn't produce to a high level, but can we really blame him? Like, he was throwing in Nick Westbrook-Akine half the season. And maybe the Titans add a third receiver to this offense. Maybe they go out and sign another receiver so that if Julio and A.J. Brown and Derrick Henry get injured again, they're a little bit more, stocked with some weapons to be able to compete. Maybe they add a tight end or something like that. So Ryan Tannehill, he's produced QB1 numbers each of the last 2 seasons before this year. And this is a guy that was going, in that quarterback 12 to 15 range in most dynasty drafts last year. And like I said, he wasn't really, changing much about his situation outside of the Arthur Smith departure and the injuries that we saw. And right now, Ryan Tannehill's value is at a low point, which is why I think is a good time to buy him. And as you guys can see on the screen, you can trade a guy like Ramondre Stevenson, who I think is a good, a player to have in dynasty. He's a guy that has proven at the very least he's a good running back, but give me a guy that is going to be a locked and loaded QB2 for my dynasty roster in a super flex format any day of the week. And these are super flex trades that he was traded away for. And also he was traded away in exchange for Baker Mayfield and a 3rd round pick and a 5th round pick, like late round draft capital, and a quarterback that has not proven. Well, like, we're hoping the ceiling for Baker Mayfield is what Ryan Tannehill has been in 2019 and 2020. And then another trade, Ryan Tannehill and Chase Edmonds in exchange for Jimmy Garoppolo, who, again, I would rather have straight up than Ryan Tannehill, and a 2nd round pick, who I think is, capable of balancing out that deal a little bit, but I would still take the Ryan Tannehill side of that. So yeah, Ryan Tannehill, quarterback 21, is just a little bit too low for me, given the weapons that he has and the ability that we've seen from him the last couple of years.
Yeah, and I fully agree with you. Again, the main thing this year is, again, was he a great quarterback this year from a real life perspective? No, he had some issues. But at the end of the day here, when you're losing Julio Jones, when you're losing A.J. Brown, when you're losing Derrick Henry, the 3 lifebloods of this offense, you're throwing to Nick Westbrook-Akine. You're throwing to Josh Reynolds at times this year. You're throwing to freaking Dontrell Hilliard. Yeah, your stats are going to suffer. And the main thing I take away here is we like to throw the word regression around all the time. And the main thing going into this year was, would Ryan Tannehill regress from a 6.9 touchdown percentage in 2021? In 2020? Well, he did. He regressed down to below a 4% touchdown rate in 2021. His normal value should lie between those 2 marks. Again, I don't expect him to throw 3.95% in terms of touchdown rate again in 2022. That is just an absurdly low number that was impacted by the fact that he was not throwing to ideal NFL level receivers. But again, you're talking about the overall passing output potentially being in a positive regression standpoint. Well, this is a guy that's going to also give you a ton of value with his legs, because although he's not going to give you, Josh Allen level 750 yards, 10 touchdowns, I mean, you could pretty much count him in for 250 yards, 300 yards, 5 to 8 touchdowns. And at the end of the day here, from a quarterback that's not viewed as Konami code, that is very good production.
Yeah, absolutely. He had a couple rushing touchdowns this year, and they were really the only reason he stayed afloat at all in some of those games, because they were still using, even without Derrick Henry, they were still using a lot of Deontay Foreman and Dontrell Hilliard to move the offense because they just had no receivers. And even despite all this, Ryan Tannehill still had a top 12 PFF passing grade this year, even without most of his weapons for the most part this year. So moving off of the contenders, obviously, if you guys are rebuilding, you're in a productive struggle. Maybe you have a lot of draft capital this year. Maybe you have a team that's ready to compete next year, but you want to make sure that you're still securing your long-term future, and you have all this draft capital and you don't know how to spend it. Some of the guys that we think are value accruing, rebuilding type of quarterbacks that we think you should go out and acquire. I'll let you take it away with your first one there.
Yeah, and this is a guy I did not expect to have on my list. and a guy that I relatively am lower on comparative to a lot of people, but I don't understand the current dynasty value of Jalen Hurts. He's quarterback 16 at age 23, and some of the guys he's behind just are kind of baffling to me, even from a win now type of perspective. I mean, realistically here, Tua Tagovailoa is just behind. Tua Tagovailoa and Mac Jones are just behind Jalen Hurts in terms of keep trade cut. That doesn't make sense to me. Because at the end of the day here, Jalen Hurts was a top 10 quarterback this year. He's 23 years old. The Eagles have 3 first-round picks. Unless they are able to acquire an Aaron Rodgers, a Deshaun Watson, a Russell Wilson level quarterback, Jalen Hurts is going to be the guy in 2021 or 2022. We can already acknowledge that. And in terms of just strictly win now options, he is currently behind a guy like Aaron Rodgers. What are we doing here? I get it. Aaron Rodgers is probably the best real life quarterback in the NFL right now, but he is 38 years old, and fantasy-wise, he is worse than Jalen Hurts, and we don't even know what's going to be happening with Aaron Rodgers post this year. And you can basically get more value for Aaron Rodgers right now in the market than you can for Jalen Hurts. And to show you some of the deals that I've seen floated around basically for Jalen Hurts, Matthew Stafford in exchange for, get this, another guy we're going to talk about in the video later, just hold your horses, Jalen Hurts, Michael Thomas, and a second-round pick. What? Leonard Fournette for Jalen Hurts. Wentz, Freeman, and Madison for Hurts, Minshew, a second. And then De'Ami Brown, a first and a second for Jalen Hurts. Listen, I was high on De'Ami Brown going into the year. I would give that package up in a heartbeat to get Jalen Hurts if I need a quarterback too. So again, even if you're in a contending standpoint, a rebuilding standpoint, this is a quarterback that should be able to accrue value as long as he is a starting quarterback in the NFL. At the end of the day, even if you wanted to ship him out week 5 of next year after he's the quarterback 8, you're going to get way more value then than you were to on this current trade market.
Yeah, exactly. And you said he was a top 10 quarterback this year. He was a top 6 quarterback this year. Like, he was truly a difference-making level quarterback. He averaged, was it 21.41 points per game? And this was despite having a couple down games towards the end of the season when they shifted towards more of a run-first mentality. Like you said, the big draw of Jalen Hurts that they have 3 first-round picks this year to add pieces around him, whether it's weapons, offensive line, whatever. The reality of the situation is maybe they'd like to upgrade at quarterback, but who are they going to upgrade to? That's like a real thing in the market, right? They can't get, Justin Herbert or a Joe Burrow because they don't exist in this draft. They also don't have, they have access to Deshaun Watson if they want to go after him. And we know they've been in that market already. The Eagles have been a prominent feature team in the market for Deshaun Watson, but it also sounds like they're going to commit to Jalen Hurts. It also sounds like from how he's played this season, they're going to, try and build around him. And I don't think one playoff game against the defending Super Bowl champions is going to sway that, coming out of this past week. So Jalen Hurts, he went from overvalued to undervalued in Dynasty in one offseason, even though he finished as a top 6 quarterback, which doesn't make any sense because he was a guy that people were ranking inside their top 10 Dynasty quarterbacks last year. And we weren't a part of that. We thought he was a little bit more in the QB 15 range, which is where he is now, which doesn't really make a whole lot of sense considering he finished as a top 6 quarterback this year. So a guy that I think, and we already kind of alluded to this guy throughout this entire Jalen Hurts discussion. Do you have something else to say? It looks like you're about to say something.
All I was going to say is we literally, like, if you were a Jalen Hurts truther, again, we were not a part of that. If you were a Jalen Hurts truther, you saw exactly what you needed to see this year. Why are we lowering his value based off a year where, again, as you mentioned, he was a top 6 quarterback? I don't know. But again, I'll let you take it away before I go on a whole rant.
Yeah, exactly. And a guy that is, been rumored to replace Jalen Hurts in Philadelphia is Deshaun Watson, who I think is also a phenomenal rebuilding type of asset. If you guys are tearing it down, if you're, going towards a productive struggle, maybe you just had your first year of a productive struggle and you want to continue to accrue value. Deshaun Watson is at a peak low, I guess not peak, but the lowest point he'll ever be at this year. And the reason I think that's the case is because I think his legal situation is going to get resolved soon. Now, again, I don't have any evidence to support that. It's just a gut feeling. I think it's going to happen. And he was close to being traded for this season. So it's obviously at a point in the eyes of NFL teams that they're willing to take on that risk. And all that being said, he's out of sight, out of mind right now. He didn't play a single snap this year. People are going to forget just how good Deshaun Watson is when he's on the field. He's currently the quarterback 12 in Dynasty right now. And I'm telling you right now, the second he gets traded, the second his legal situation gets resolved, he will be in my top 5 quarterbacks. He will probably be my quarterback 3 because he's just that good. He's that mobile as well. He provides that much with his legs. He is everything that Josh Allen is. The type of quarterback that Deshaun Watson is when he's on the field. And if he goes to the Carolina Panthers, if he goes to the Philadelphia Eagles or whatever team that we want to slide him into, he's going to immediately slot back into the end of the first round dynasty startup value. And you'll have just made an entire, first or second pick value in terms of accrued value in the trade that you made, because this is what you can get for Deshaun Watson right now. People are trading Deshaun Watson away in exchange for Ryan Tannehill, who I think is a good contending quarterback to acquire in exchange for a first round pick in Ryan Tannehill. If you're a rebuilding team and you have Tannehill on your roster, then obviously that is the type of trade that you want to make. Deshaun Watson was traded away in exchange for Russell Wilson and 2 second-round picks, in exchange for Aaron Rodgers and a 4th-round pick. Like Danny said, Aaron Rodgers is 38 years old. Like, there's no chance that Deshaun Watson is going to be less valuable to me than Aaron Rodgers in Dynasty. Matthew Stafford, who had a top 10 season this year, is still up there in age, has still dealt with injuries. This guy got Deshaun Watson plus for Matthew Stafford. Deshaun Watson in exchange for, I don't even know what this last guy's doing, Mike Glennon, Jared Goff, and Amon-Ra St. Brown. Like, that is not even close. So the moral of this story is, out of sight, out of mind. It's the best time to buy Deshaun Watson because he has not played a game this season. So the best time to acquire him is clearly now. Even though his legal situation has not resolved itself, he is still going to be undervalued in the minds of a lot of people because the uncertainty avoidance factor is real with his legal situation.
Yeah, no, I fully agree with you here. And again, you mentioned, even if you're the most pessimistic about Deshaun Watson, if we knew he was fully going into the year, the worst you can rank him is what? Quarterback 7, quarterback 8. This is a guy who's finished as a top 5 quarterback 3 years prior to the legal issues arising. Again, I fully agree. If you were in a rebuilding middle of the pack situation and you need to, swing for the fences and try to take that shot that can absolutely elevate you to the top. If Watson is a starting quarterback in the NFL, 2022 or even 2023, he would be a good buy, and quite frankly, because again, he is still young. He's still 26 years old. He's still an absolute superstar. He's still going to give you 450, 500 yards, 6 to 8 touchdowns on the ground. I don't get it. I don't get why people are so wary of, getting into this, semantics of the situation, when at the end of the day here, fantasy football is a business. Fantasy football is who can score me the most points. Again, legal issues aside, Deshaun Watson, when he's on the field, can score you really as many points as anybody else at the quarterback position on any given week.
Exactly. Yeah. Like you said, 2 top 5 seasons before this year. He was quite literally a league-winning quarterback in 2020. He had a stretch of games, and I had him. I won my championship, and due in large part to Deshaun Watson in 2020. He had a stretch of games where he was dropping 30 a week. Like, I swear to God, he had 5, 6, 7 games in a row where he was dropping 30 a week, and he could be in a better situation than Houston as well. So moving on from the quarterback position, let's get on to the running backs. I'll let you take it away with your contending running back that you want to go acquire. Now, again, some of these are going to vary in value. Some of them are elite league winning, type of players, and some of them are more so guys that can help fill out your roster.
Yeah, and my contending running back, by the way, my main ideology as a whole on contending running backs is trade for them in season for the most part, because most likely, again, you're aside from this case I'm going to mention, aside from this case, you're mostly trading for RB2s, and you can get, the guys like Connors and Gordons and other depth pieces for really, really low values from rebuilding teams during the season. Like, you could have probably gotten,
and in the off season too, like close to the season in August and stuff.
Yeah,
is usually the time to buy those guys as well.
Yeah, once we kind of know like what's going to happen, again, if you go to a rebuilder at the beginning of the season and somebody's having like a James Conner like start, you say, listen, I'll give you my early 3rd for this guy next year. They'll most likely do it. But off of that, let's talk about strictly guys that you actually want to acquire, not the guys that you're forced to acquire when you decide to contend. Christian McCaffrey is a guy, if I am a contender, I am making sure I'm putting offers for, putting feelers out all offseason. Again, this is a guy who is the RB5 in terms of consensus dynasty trade value. And I basically outlined it in a recent tweet a couple of weeks ago, but this is literally the generational asset, the tier above asset that we have not seen in fantasy football, similar to what Cooper Kupp was for the wide receiver position this year. Jonathan Taylor, great player. Derrick Henry, great player. Neither of them can even sniff McCaffrey's point per game ceiling from a PPR perspective when he's been on the field. 2021 this year, 25.85 PPR points per game. 30.13 in 2020, 29.39 in 2019, 25.1 in 2018. In games that he has 50+% of the snaps, he is as much of a lock to score 25 PPR points as anybody has been since LaDainian Tomlinson. I genuinely say that when McCaffrey is on the field, There's no other advantage in fantasy football that can even remotely sniff what he does. And you guys can see the comparative trade market values right now. Christian McCaffrey for Austin Eckler. Austin Eckler is a phenomenal running back. He had a great year this year. He was still under 20 PPR points per game. McCaffrey is almost 6 PPR points per game better this year with 50+% snaps, despite dealing with multiple ailments. But recency bias is going to let you get that happen. You guys can see the other deals. Kittle straight up, Mixon straight up, Henry Montgomery in a second for McCaffrey and Sanders, and then another Henry for McCaffrey straight up. If this is the type of value I'm going to have to give up for McCaffrey, he's going to be on every single one of my contending teams.
Yeah, Mixon's such a good example of how to flip one contending asset for another, because the recency bias factor of Mixon being a top 5 running back this year, McCaffrey getting hurt again, is the way you can get that. And again, Mixon hit his ceiling this year, and he still wasn't even remotely close to what McCaffrey can provide you. Now, I know we've talked about McCaffrey quite a bit so far this offseason already. So we'll kind of pivot away from McCaffrey. But again, if you're a contending team, there is no better asset to go acquire than Christian McCaffrey right now, because if he can play 14, 15, 16 games next year, he's going to win people leagues.
Yeah, no, 100%. And again, people don't realize how young McCaffrey still is. Like, McCaffrey's only a month older than Mixon, but everybody kind of forgets that because he's had a couple injury-filled seasons when, man, like, are we not forgetting what this guy literally was on the field? Come on, guys. What are we doing?
Yeah. And speaking of being a month older than a player, let's talk about my contending running back, and that's Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs, listen to this. Josh Jacobs is a month older than Najee Harris, who was a rookie this year. And Josh Jacobs has been in the league since 2019. So the reason I think Josh Jacobs is a good contending buy is because I don't really think people understand just how good Josh Jacobs was once John Gruden resigned. Once John Gruden resigned, Josh Jacobs was the RB6 the rest of the season. He was the RB10 in points per game. And not only that, but we saw Josh Jacobs finally unlock the receiving ceiling that we knew he had coming out of college. We knew he had in Alabama, but he was never used to that degree. Now, it could be in part due because Kenyon Drake got hurt, but the important thing is usually in the past, if a guy like Kenyon Drake had gotten hurt, they would have used Jalen Richard in that role. They would have used whatever other third down back that's not named Josh Jacobs in the 2-minute drill, the long down and distance, the receiving work role that Josh Jacobs saw towards the end of the season. Now, I think that is a very, very important factor to consider when you're acquiring a contending running back, because the way I view Josh Jacobs now is not all that differently than I view David Montgomery. And David Montgomery, as much as, I think he could be undervalued to some degree, is valued tremendously higher comparatively to Josh Jacobs. And I think from a talent perspective, I think Jacobs might even be a bit better of a player. So Josh Jacobs, you can acquire him right now for a guy straight up like Mike Williams. And now Mike Williams, I think, is a solid dynasty piece to have to your roster, but Mike Williams is a wide receiver who's, going to give you wide receiver 2-3 production, is a little bit more replaceable than back-end RB1 production that I think you can get from Josh Jacobs in the next couple of years. And again, this guy's only 24 years old. He's 23.9 years old as of today, will be 24 and a half next year. So this is a guy that is still young, can still give you good value. And even late into his career, wouldn't be surprising if I see him produce like Melvin Gordon produced this year.
Yeah, and it's funny that you mentioned that because Nick Chubb is currently the RB12 in terms of like keep, trade, cut, like relative dynasty value, right? And Josh Jacobs, as you mentioned, is the RB19. Josh Jacobs is 2.5 years younger, has more of a receiving workload, and is going to get overall nearly as many running back in terms of carries. So realistically here, why would you want to hold an aging asset like Nick Chubb, who is relatively a smidge better from a fantasy point per game, fantasy overall usage output, when you can take a chance on Josh Jacobs, maybe take a chance on the Raiders situation improvement?
Probably get a first on top of Jacobs for Nick Chubb.
It's seriously, it's unreal. I mean, Nick Chubb had 25 targets this year. Josh Jacobs had 54 receptions. Like, guys, don't overthink this.
Yep, for sure. So let's talk about some rebuilding running backs. These are a lot easier to acquire, or not a lot easier to acquire. These are a lot easier to rationalize acquiring because they are typically better investments to make than contending running backs, because even Josh Jacobs, who I think is a good guy to go out and acquire, does come some risk because he does have some tread on his tires. So a guy that is a rebuilding running back that you would go out and acquire, who is that player?
Yeah, and I mean, this isn't like pure rebuilding as opposed to a guy that I think is going to increase in value, especially over the offseason, especially when he signs his new contract as a free agent this year. But Ronald Jones, again, this guy is still young, only 24 years old, currently being valued as the RB43. The main reason why I'm looking to acquire a guy like Ronald Jones is really the free cost that we're getting. I mean, right now, you guys can see the comparative deals. I love Michael Gallup, but if you're telling me right now I can get Rojo in a second for Gallup, Michael Gallup's value is probably only in early to mid second anyway. So I'm able to take that and Rojo for him. Great deal for me. DJ Chark has been hurt. We don't necessarily know what's going to happen. Kind of a volatile deep threat. I'd rather take the chance on Rojo, maybe getting a Melvin Gordon level contract as I'm going to chime into. Ronald Jones for Justin Jackson and a 2022 third round pick. Give me Rojo all day here. Now let's talk about the actual situation as to why I like him. He's already shown flashes when he was Tampa. I mean, heck, we were touting this guy as their most talented back coming into the year, and he still has the level of talent, nearly 1,000 rushing yards and 165 receiving yards in 14 games in 2020. That player is still there. Unfortunately, in terms of the situation this year in Tampa, Leonard Fournette was able to take over. No problem. Are we at all shocked if Ronald Jones goes out on his second contract and has a Melvin Gordon, like even, I mean, you could say even a Leonard Fournette, like
You could say James Conner for sure too.
James Conner, like there's so many examples of these type of underutilized cheap backs that can provide RB2 level upside, which if Ronald Jones was given 200 touches, 250 touches in a season, I would almost assuredly call him a lock for at least top 20, potentially top 15 production in a point per game basis. Ronald Jones at RB43 price tag has the talent, has the market to be able to garner a starting role in the NFL. And I think that's going to happen. By the time he gets signed this offseason on a team, he's going to go from the RB43 to potentially a top 25 level running back in terms of dynasty value.
Yeah, and if he lands in a good offense the way James Conner did, if he goes to the Bills or something to complement Devin Singletary, if he goes somewhere like that where he can provide a good like goal line role to a team, then he's going to be valuable for fantasy at minimum as like a back end RB2, high end RB3 in redraft leagues. And obviously, if he has that kind of value in those kind of leagues, a 24-year-old running back with minimal tread on his tires, maybe it's just he needs a different situation. Maybe Bruce Arians and him don't get along. Who the hell knows? But there is some kind of tension between Tampa Bay and Ronald Jones, and a change of scenery is definitely something that he really, really needs going into this offseason. So the guy that, I mean, we're recording this after the Rams playoff game last night, so maybe this price tag isn't actually accurate. Cam Akers, running back from the Los Angeles Rams, he's currently being valued as RB15 in keep trade cut. Now, I think he's probably a little bit more highly valued than RB15, just based in the minds of what people just saw Cam Akers do in the playoffs and what could continue the rest of the playoffs if he continues to play well. He's only 22 years old. He's coming off a torn Achilles, but he tore it 6 months ago, and he didn't even miss a season because of it, which is why I think Cam Akers honestly belongs closer to people's top fives than he does closer to people's top 15s. And with Cam Akers, you're getting a guy that is still going to hold some risk in the eyes of whoever has him right now. And if you can trade for him using a guy like Tua Tagovailoa, like you guys can see on the screen, Miles Sanders in a first-round pick, Keenan Allen, and a second-rounder for Cam Akers and Darrell Henderson. Dalvin Cook is a perfect example of a guy that I think you can probably get Cam Akers plus in exchange for Dalvin Cook right now. That is definitely something I'm willing to be doing because coming into the season, you guys know how high we were on Cam Akers. He was an RB, top 5 running back for us in Dynasty coming into the year before he tore his Achilles. Obviously, some medical shit happened, like something advanced in the field of torn Achilles for Cam Akers to be able to come back from a torn Achilles in 6 months. So going forward, we're already seeing Sean McVay give him a workhorse role. Already. He's coming off a torn Achilles 6 months later, and already Sony Michel, who's played well, Darrell Henderson, who's had some flashes here and there, are being tossed to the side.
Yeah, no, and I'm glad you mentioned that. He actually rose by the time we wrote our sheet to now as the RB13. But again, that is still too low. You mentioned Dalvin Cook, Nick Chubb are the two main examples here that I would flip for Cam Akers in a heartbeat. This is a 22-year-old running back who has shown at least yesterday that he had all the burst that he had before that Achilles injury. He had all that ability, all that talent that we saw prior to the injury. And again, you're able to take the chance on upside at a young, talented player rather than kind of, the steady known commodities that we know with Dalvin Cook and Nick Chubb. I'm easily taking Cam Akers for them. And again, as you mentioned, you could probably get Cam Akers in a second for Chubb or Cook. And that's a valuation I would do in a heartbeat.
Right. And even if you have to flip them straight up, like you said, I would still prefer Cam Akers straight up to those guys. So let's get into the wide receiver position. Talk about some contending wide receivers. I feel like if you're a contending team and you're looking to push your chips to the middle, wide receivers are typically the better investments to make as opposed to running backs or even quarterbacks and tight ends some of the time. So if you guys are looking, let's say you finished third in your league this year and you're looking for another flex piece to get you over the top, who's somebody that they can go out and acquire for cheap right now?
Now, this one is just absolutely stupid when I saw where his current value was, but wide receiver 34, or sorry, wide receiver 33 on the current trade market, according to Keep Trade Cut, is none other than the New Orleans Saints star Michael Thomas. Now, I get it. If you guys have owned him in fantasy these past couple years, you were not fun. I mean, like if you did your draft, for example, like best ball drafts, you got him early. He didn't play at all this year. Last year prior, he was a top 6, 7 pick. You picked him, had the injury, didn't really play much. Let us not forget exactly what this guy is when he is on the field, and that is a legitimate top 5 fantasy wide receiver. I mean, overall, you guys can see the type of deals that are going on for him currently. Michael Carter in a second for Guyton, Ridley, and Thomas. Cooper Kupp for Michael Thomas in a 2023 first. I love Cooper Kupp. He is an elite league winning player, but he is currently older than Michael Thomas, and you're getting a first attached to Thomas. Absolutely in a heartbeat. Fields and Michael Thomas for Mac Jones in a 2024 first. Alvin Kamara for Thomas in a 2023 first, and then finally Mooney in a third for Michael Thomas. Like, what are we doing here? Are we forgetting that this is a guy prior to these past 2 years was legitimately the wide receiver 1, wide receiver 6, wide receiver 5, wide receiver 7 throughout his career in terms of his PPR rank? Let's not fade him. The quarterback situation is going to get better. They're going to address it whether they bring Jameis Winston back, draft a player, trade for a Jimmy Garoppolo. Regardless, they know this year that they can't enter the season with Taysom Hill as their starter. They tried that experiment, did not work. And when Michael Thomas on the field, regardless of who's throwing him the football, is one of the best target generators in the entire NFL. I mean, we're forgetting this guy had nearly, 185 targets when he broke the record in 2019? It's unbelievable what he does on the field, and you're getting him for, as I said, outside of wide receiver 2 valuation.
Right. And quite literally nobody dislikes Michael Thomas more than I do. Like just as a player, because I'm a Bucks fan, I just hate the New Orleans Saints. But yeah, this is an asinine price for Michael Thomas. Like I'm going to probably biasly rank him a little bit lower than market value just because I dislike the guy a little bit. But yeah, this is too low. Michael Thomas, another example similar to Deshaun Watson of an out of sight, out of mind guy. Everybody just kind of forgets about him. And yeah, he's got some like diva issues as well. But even if he were to get traded or something away from the New Orleans Saints, I still have faith in his ability to command targets wherever he goes, because that's really all he's done throughout his entire career. Even back to his rookie season, he was a guy who was commanding targets on the field.
Yeah, and it's funny. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I remember we were when we were prepping for this video, I literally mentioned, oh yeah, Michael Thomas is going to be one of my buys. And Corey's like, oh, what's he, like wide receiver 17, 18? When I told you 34, you legit, like the face you made was ridiculous, because that, quite frankly, is the reaction we should have. Michael Thomas, wide receiver 34, behind guys like Tyler Lockett. Like, why?
Yeah, no, I figured he'd be in the like DJ Moore, Terry McLaurin type of range of the rankings. But yeah, like you said, not even remotely located there. So Calvin Ridley, another guy that is pretty similar to Michael Thomas, obviously a guy that is kind of out of sight, out of mind. It sounds like the break that he took away from football could kind of stem from him not wanting to play for Atlanta, based on the fact that it sounds like he's requested a trade. I'm not really sure. I'm not going to speculate on the situation, but by all accounts, it sounds to me more likely that he's going to be on the field if he's requesting a trade to play football. So wide receiver 22 prices for a guy that, I mean, had to have been going in the top 6 to 8 dynasty wide receivers this time last year. He had a bit of a down start to the season. He was like on the precipice of being the classic buy low candidate at the beginning of the year, and then he walked away from football. So Calvin Ridley at wide receiver 22, I would much rather have Calvin Ridley than a guy like Terry McLaurin, in my opinion. Even though I like Terry McLaurin, I think he's a great player. They're the same age, and Calvin Ridley has had just far more productive NFL seasons from a fantasy perspective. And right now, you're able to trade for Calvin Ridley for Cordero Patterson and 2 second-round picks. This guy got Michael Pittman, a first-round pick, in exchange for Tyreek Hill in a second. Calvin Ridley in exchange for David Montgomery in a third. We also get Calvin Ridley and Amari Rodgers for Ramondre Stevenson and Rondale Moore. Like we're forgetting about a guy that was literally a top 8 to 6, maybe even top 5 dynasty wide receiver for a lot of people this time last year.
Yeah, no, again, I fully agree with you. I mean, this was a guy that we saw in 15 games last year, garner 143 targets, nearly 1,400 yards, and 9 touchdowns. Still the same player that we saw. Again, out of sight, out of mind. He walked out away from football, had a little bit of mental demons he had to go through. But at the end of the day, we know what he is from an on-field product standpoint. And even if he doesn't play football next year, even if he returns in 2023, you're still taking a huge reward home run type of spot, like I mentioned with Michael Thomas, and acquiring him at a wide receiver 22 price tag for, again, as you mentioned, a guy that probably even snuck his way into the top 5 wide receivers selected in startup drafts last year. Don't fade Ridley, still an elite talent. This is a perfect opportunity to go acquire him.
Yeah, and especially from an NFL perspective, there is a lot of teams that could use Calvin Ridley. The New York Jets stand out as an example, pair him with Elijah Moore. The Cleveland Browns are a screaming example of a team that could use Calvin Ridley. And even if he goes to those teams, because maybe those aren't like the most ideal landing spots in your mind, he's still going to be the number one on those offenses. He's still going to command targets. And as we saw via Matt Harmon's reception perception before the season, he is a number one receiver. It's not just because Julio Jones was there in years past that he was producing. He is on his own a number one wide receiver, and I think he's going to be treated as such by NFL teams in the trade market.
Yeah, no, again, I fully agree with you with Calvin Ridley. Moving off our, true on true contending wide receivers to acquire, the guys that are a little bit older that are really only going to fit that contending timeline. Well, this is a guy that was a contending level wide receiver this year, is 24 years old, is at minimum the 1B in his offense, yet is currently getting valued as the wide receiver 32. I'll give you guys a second to guess who I'm talking about right now. All right. You guys got it? Comment down below if you actually got it. Marquise Brown, wide receiver from the Baltimore Ravens, currently the wide receiver 32 on the Dynasty market. And some of the trades that we're seeing here. Judy in a third. I love Jerry Judy, but Judy in a third for Marquise Brown in a second. What the fuck are we doing, guys?
I'm not even sure Jerry Judy is good. And that's not a disrespect to Jerry Judy, but at least I know Marquise Brown can command targets and produce for fantasy.
Absolutely. And again, we see here Mike Williams, a third and a fourth for Marquise Brown. Listen, a third and fourth isn't going to sway me off of a younger, more talented, better player, which is what we saw from Marquise Brown this year in fantasy football. And then this deal here, Marquise Brown, Mike Williams, a third and a fourth for Komet, a first and a second. I'll take Marquise Brown's side there too, especially if you're in a contending situation, although that deal is a little bit closer. But either way, let's talk about Marquise Brown. This is a guy who was legitimately demanding targets. I get it. You have your little pre-draft biases of this guy being 5'9", $180, can't be a true alpha in the NFL. This guy was able to garner 145 targets in 16 games this year, despite spending realistically a good amount of those games with Tyler Huntley as the quarterback one in that offense. And we saw Cincinnati game on, the first Cincinnati game played and on, we saw his target outlook look like 14 12 targets, 12, 13, 10, 7, 8, 14, 9, 8. Even if he was, inefficient in some of those games, the fact that he was able to garner targets with Tyler Huntley, even in the game at points, just kind of goes to show you that this is a priority for the Baltimore Ravens in getting the guy the ball. And are we forgetting the fact that this guy was able to produce 90 receptions for the guy we kind of just profiled as this low volume, deep play threat? Because his yards per target was only 6.95. He was doing it on the back of absurd volume, not absurd efficiency this year. And again, I do think that with Marquise Brown, once Lamar Jackson comes back, we should see that efficiency spike up to what we saw at the beginning of the season, where he was absolutely spit roasting the Kansas City Chiefs on Sunday Night Football. It was absolutely absurd. And he's currently going behind 31 wide receivers, including his teammate, Rashad Bateman. You're not going to find a channel that loves Rashad Bateman as much as we do, but it is absolutely ludicrous right now that he is currently being valued ahead of Marquise Brown.
Right. And we wouldn't have said that coming into the season, right? That's something we definitely had to realize based on the season. The fact that Marquise Brown had 7 double-digit target games this year. He had 11 of his 16 games where he had 8 or more targets. This is a guy that commanded volume at a level we didn't know he could do. So we're admitting, the fact that we were too low on Marquise Brown coming into the season, but Rashad Bateman has to take away targets from Marquise Brown. They're not just going to be given to him. And not only that, but Marquise Brown did this with the tight end one on his team, with Mark Andrews producing at the level he produced this year too. So from all the things I've seen from Marquise Brown this year, I'm, emphatically impressed with what I saw. And he at minimum should be a top 24 dynasty wide receiver.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. Again, 32 made no sense. 24 is more appropriate. Again, you have your concerns. You think Bateman can take a next step. You know, Mark Andrews in that offense. Fine. Most pessimistic you could be is fringe top 25, but the fact that he's not even in the top 30, absolutely a crime. Go buy this guy. Again, even if you're a contender, you're a rebuilder, you're trying to accrue value. This is a guy that when he starts off those first 5 games with 450 yards and 6 touchdowns, getting the ball from Lamar Jackson, he's going to be a fringe top 15 wide receiver for people in terms of dynasty value. And if we're going to pick a situation of, player that kind of gets disrespected going into the year, similar situation, elite tight end, unsure about how the volume is going to get divided, I think this could be 2022's Deebo Samuel in terms of potentially entering that elite territory from a fantasy perspective. We saw it with Deebo. Everybody had their question marks about his role in this offense. He went out and performed. I think we're going to see the same thing with Marquise Brown in 2022.
I honestly think my rebuilding / value accruing wide receiver is more likely to end up like Deebo Samuel in terms of taking that next step, because DJ Moore, the last guy that we're going to talk about officially in this video, this is a crime that he's wide receiver 15. This is a dude that has produced 3 straight, nearly 1,200 yard seasons and is still not in the top 12 dynasty wide receivers, despite still being 24 years old. By the way, had a tremendous prospect profile coming out, has produced at a young age in the NFL. He has never had a good quarterback. Now, the second Deshaun Watson or whoever gets traded or whoever the Carolina Panthers decide to add to this quarterback situation, the second that happens, DJ Moore's buying window is closed because everybody knows this guy is capable of producing at a high level. We saw it at the beginning of this year when he had good quarterback play, and I'm saying good with quotations because Sam Darnold played like a top 12 quarterback the first 4 games or so of the NFL season, and we saw in that span DJ Moore be a top 5 fantasy wide receiver because he has that potential, and he quietly produced a 163 target season this year. He had like 10 games of double-digit targets on the season. Like I said, if we could just get this dude a quarterback, then he is going to be the next DeAndre Hopkins, the next Allen Robinson, the guy that gets into the top 5 to 3. I think he has top 3 wide receiver potential on any given NFL season. And the second that happens, this is a dude that's not leaving the top 5 dynasty wide receivers going forward. So at wide receiver 15, you're getting that uncertainty discount of the fact that we don't know what they're going to do at quarterback, but this is an aggressive ownership group. This is an aggressive front office with a coach that could be on the hot seat. They're going to make a splash. I am almost willing to bet that if Carolina does trade for a quarterback, it's going to be a big name like Russell Wilson, Deshaun Watson, go out and sign an Aaron Rodgers, whatever the case is. I think they're going to make a big splash at the quarterback position. And whatever happens is going to at least increase the value of DJ Moore relative to the market, if not increase his fantasy production altogether, which is what we're going for.
Yeah, and DJ Moore, this is a guy with 3 straight top 24 PPR seasons. Can you guess in the 4 years of his career how many total touchdowns he scored?
Well, I'm looking at it, so I know how many it is. But I know over the course of 4 years, it's less than
14.
Like 15. Yeah, it's 14.
14 touchdowns in 4 years. Now, the fact that he's already been a wide receiver too, despite not being able to score, kind of shows you that he is able to command volume. He is able to produce at an efficient level to be able to produce on that volume. And again, I mentioned he had 14 touchdowns. He had 4 touchdowns this year. 3 of those 4 came in the first 4 games when Sam Darnold was producing average to above average quarterback play. So could you only imagine if they added a Deshaun Watson? The narrative of him not being able to score touchdowns would get proven completely false if they had an above average, even an average level like B+, Jimmy Garoppolo type of quarterback would be able to help DJ Moore hit that ceiling. I fully agree. Again, wide receiver 15, like for a guy that has top 3, top 5 level ceiling, you have to go out and buy him. Again, he's less than 25 years old. I don't think people realize that because he's been in the NFL for, again, 4 full years, but he is 24 years old right now. Go scoop him up again. You're trying to accrue value. You're trying to contend. Whatever you're trying to do, DJ Moore is going to be able to return on that investment in spades once they address that quarterback position.
Yeah, the single most underrated receiver in the entire NFL, in my opinion. Yeah. Number 76 in catchable target rate, number 79 target quality rating. This guy doesn't have a quarterback. Let's get him a QB for the love of God, Carolina. So DJ Moore, the guy that we're going to close this video out with, obviously, we'll talk about some honorable mentions. I think if you're looking for contending, we didn't want to really go in depth with tight ends, but if you're looking for a contending tight end, I think look no further than Rob Gronkowski. It's pretty obvious that he's a guy that is up there in age, but can still produce at a high level. Also, we saw Zach Ertz do the same thing this year with Arizona. We don't really know what his future is, but maybe he re-signs with the Cardinals. Maybe he goes to a new team. At the very least, he proved that he can still play. And I think a team is going to give him a chance in free agency due to that. Rebuilding wise, I think Cole Kmet is probably one of the best tight ends you can go out and acquire because a lot went wrong for him this year. He didn't even score a touchdown this entire season because he had Andy Dalton and a rookie quarterback. With Justin Fields going into his second year, I think Cole Kmet proved that he is the number one tight end on his team. First and foremost, he's running a lot of routes and he can command targets. He just didn't have the quarterback play necessary to help him produce. And if Justin Fields takes a big step in 2022, Cole Kmet could be a huge beneficiary of that.
Yeah, no, I fully agree with you. Another guy that I would personally be looking for as a rebuilder as well would be Noah Fant. Again, a lot of people might be soured, hasn't been able to produce, but we have seen in flashes this guy has the top 5 level talent that we look for. And if we're going to spot a breakout, we're going to spot a guy that has been getting kind of underrated by the majority of sources, is still less than 25, is still prone to potentially, as we mentioned with DJ Moore, seeing a good quarterback upgrade. And if we're getting Noah Fant, a quarterback that can get him working in space, he has, by all accounts, Darren Waller level ascension upside.
Yep. Don't disagree there. So if you guys did enjoy this video, as always, hit the like button. Helps us grow, helps us out tremendously. Comment any of your thoughts down below. Who's your favorite dynasty buy of the offseason? Who's tremendously undervalued, like some of the guys that we talked about in this video? Subscribe to the channel if you are new as well. Hit the join button on the Fantasy Stock Exchange YouTube channel to be, become a member of the channel, get custom badges, emojis, and priority response to comments, all that good stuff. So without further ado, guys, peace out. We'll talk to you soon.
Why you need the money?